Okay. So good evening and welcome to everyone on behalf of the Indian section. I welcome all of you to today's session on Mahatma letters. Today we will be taking the same letter number, chronological letter number 75, which we began in the last session. And this is the part 2, which is being directed by Brother C.A. Shinde ji. Let us begin the session with the universal invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he's also one with every other. So I welcome Shinde ji. We know Brother Shinde ji is the National Lecturer of Indian Section and International Speaker of the Theosophical Society. So I request him to continue with part 2 of chronological letter number 75. Shinde ji, please.
Thank you, Vivaji, and thank you to all who are attending online. So I am very happy to be with you all online. Actually, this letter number 75 and Mahatma letter number 53, but chronologically 75. What we learn from this letter is very important. We learn from this letter what Masters points us towards our human psyche and how it makes us impatient and creates delusion. So here Hume's delusion and Fern's probationary period, how he will be trained and how there is delusion because of human psyche. So Master points us towards our own psyche, and the letter clearly states that impatience and delusion will last forever. They won't end. There are impatience and delusions for everyone because it is a part of the human psyche and it will last forever, they say. What it means, it lasts forever. I think it means we are not able to change our psyche. In the sense, the human psyche is under development. Unless one is aware of his psychic attachments without any expectation, only then he can be able to change his psyche. As you know, humanity is in its mental development, especially mental developmental stage, humanity is now. And therefore, even though we speak, but many times humanity tells lie. It speaks lie. But his emotions never be untrue. Emotions are expressed through his eyes. Eyes are the expression of his emotional state. So when we understand this, we are not yet developed intellectually, but we have developed emotionally. Our emotions are expressed. They cannot tell lie. Emotions are always true. And Masters warns in one of the letters, in a way, Master says in the other letter I refer here, you have much to unlearn now. If you want to change your psyche, you must have to much unlearn. In the sense, the narrow prejudice of your people bind you more than you suspected. They make you intolerant. intolerant of the petty offenses of others against your artificial standards of propriety, and disposed to lose sight of essential. You are not yet able to appreciate the difference between inner purity and outer culture. This is what Master points us. And when in reference to this letter number 53, how Hume is under delusion, why he is under delusion, it is not his fault, but it is the common karma. We are getting impatient, intolerant because of the petty offenses of others against our artificial standards. And therefore, the point, there has to be purity, inner purity and outer culture, both must go hand in hand. This is what we must remember. With this background, if we read this letter, then each sentence, of course, it is very easy to understand what this letter states, but in which context it is said, that is important. Here you can understand in this letter, there are three great souls like AP Senate, A.O. Hume, Joel Cole, and with two Dugpas, Hearn himself. So all are great souls, but not yet accepted as chelas. And Master says, which he says clearly, to accept chela is easy, but to be a chela is not easy. So they are not at chelas and even not yet accepted fully. So chela must go through his probation period. He must go through his trials and tests with courage and without complaints. Here to err is human, but indifference to human is not a human. So in that sense, Hearn, whatever he was doing experiment with himself, if letter is given, he was not giving directly to them because of his other commitments. So immediately he sent to somebody to give to someone. Like this, we can't do in occultism. Whatever is order, that must be followed strictly. And if it is not done, then there will be a lot of misunderstanding, etc. And therefore, there was misunderstanding between Fern and Hume, and even many others who were, as I said, AP Senate, A.O. Hume, Joel Cole, and two Dugpas of Fern. Therefore, you know, in one of the last part, we have shown Fern holds his tongue and remains silent without reacting immediately. But he was torn within. See, he was silent, but his psyche was disturbed. He was torn within. But he had a trust in his master. And therefore, Fern was silent, holding his tongue. Otherwise, you know, without trust in the master, every word of him, still it was misunderstood. So relationship is life. That is what J. Krishnamurti states. So relationship with the chela and the master, whatever it is, you must lead that kind of spiritual life. And in spiritual life also, relationship is life. And soul of relationship is nothing but trust in the master. You must give word to the master. That means you must, soul itself is the master within. So when you give word to soul, we must keep that word. So in this sense, Master M told to KH directly. He said, not only to KH, also to the AP Senate, and instructed them not to tell anything to Hume. But Hume is under delusion, and it is really said, don't correct him. Otherwise, he begins to hate you. Correct a wise person, he will appreciate you. So, Master M directly told to AP Senate and KH also, don't go to correct Hume. Let him be with him. And as Hume can't change on one hand, and let Fern also train himself to be patient with the actions of the Hume. See here how the master is arranging all situations to train on one hand to Hume and also to train Fern for jealousy. So these two things need to be understood. Can we read now the first letter part, that is second part, we will start. The first slide I will project now. Not this, next I think. To tell truth. Yes. To tell truth, I sought to separate as much as it was possible under the circumstances the suspected headquarters from every phenomenon produced at Simla. Hence, from the correspondence that passed between Mr. Hume and myself, unless HBB, Damodar, and Deb were entirely disconnected, there was no saying what might or might not happen. So here, these three names are taken, HPB, Damodar, and Deb. They were entirely disconnected. There was no saying what might or might not happen. When there is Hume and in the Simla, all others are there, and when HBB, Damodar, and Deb are completely disconnected, then what happens, we don't know. I would like to tell these three great souls, HPB, Damodar, and Deb, you have to still to learn that, as Master said, so long as the three are these who are worthy of our Lord's blessings in tears, it can never be destroyed. So all others, they were trying to propagate theosophy, propagate brotherhood, and they were working from the Theosophical Society. They were worried for the Theosophical Society. Then Master says, don't worry about the future of the Theosophical Society. So long as there are three who are worthy of our Lord's blessing in tears, it can never be destroyed. And when they say about HPB, KH writes about HPB, which need to be understood here. KH writes, C alone is good and pure. HPB alone is good and pure. All others must and shall be suspected. The poor woman is naturally good and moral, but that very purity is so narrow a kind character. Again, whatever purity is there in HPB, Master acknowledged it as the so narrow kind purity. So there has to be a broadness, kindness, compassion, these are to be still increased. And HPB alone is good and pure. All others must and shall be suspected. So here, HPB, Damodar, and Deb were entirely disconnected. No saying what might or might not happen. The first letter, the one found in the conservatory, I gave to M to have it left at Mr. Hume's house by one of the two regular chelas. But when this is asked to give this letter to Hume, but Fern did not follow the order properly. What he did, he said in the next letter, we'll focus the next slide. So he gave that letter to T. Subbarao because he had to see him on the day. T. Subbarao was to go to see Hume, and therefore Fern took this opportunity to give to T. Subbarao and hand over to Hume. But Subbarao passed it in the ordinary way and posted it to Fern directly with instructions to either leave it at Mr. Hume's house or to send it to him through post in case he were afraid that Mr. Hume should ask him, since Fern had not the right to answer him and thus would be led to telling an untruth. So here, the letter was given to P. Subbarao, asked to pass it to Hume. But again, Subbarao said, no, it is not good. Better you send it by the post. Otherwise, he will ask why master has sent to you, not to me directly. That is what all delusion was there in the Humes. Because several times, it is in next paragraph, it is said, several times, Jalkul, DK, had tried to penetrate into Rothni Castle. Rothni Castle is nothing but the home or bungalow of Hume. So where DK himself tried to penetrate into his home, into his house, and he suffered each time so acutely that I told him to give it up. Don't peep in his house. Don't try to know what letters are dropped and all that. He must avoid that thing. Very strictness or seriousness is required. Because he was preparing for initiation and might easily fail as a consequence. That is how the masters on and often they were instructing to the chelas. What do we learn from this when we are on the spiritual path? I think one must not be anxious to know before time. Time comes. When time comes, it will be revealed. It is a process of purification. That is the process of self-purification. In fact, Master K.H. has told, process of self-purification is not the work of a moment, nor of a few months, but of years, nay, extending over a series of lives. So this is clearly mentioned in the Mahatma letters. In one of the Mahatma letters, I am quoting with reference to this. So this purification is needed. And therefore, whatever instructions are given, whether it's right or wrong, we should not judge it. We must follow it. And therefore, we should have hope, we should have dream, we should have right aspiration. And when we are praying for hope, dream, and right aspiration, then help or aid will come strangely at the right time. This is what we must remember. Then the next slide it is said, what happened to that letter? It is said, well, this letter of instructions to Jalkul, Fern did not post it, but sent a friend. Friend in the sense, his Dugpas to leave it at the house, and the latter placed it in the conservatory. This made a great mess. And he placed it in the conservatory about 2 a.m. This was half of a phenomenon. But Hume took it for an entirely thing and got very mad. But when M refused, as he thought to take up his answer in the same way, then I wrote to counsel, KH says, then I wrote to console him and told him as plainly as I could say, without breaking Master M's confidence in relation to Fern, that Jalkul or DK could do nothing for him at present, and that it was one of Maurad Chelas that had placed the letter there, etc., etc. Why this mistake is done by Fern? Perhaps, these are the uh, Dugpas. Dugpas are nothing but our own created psyche that mistakes us, that makes us to do mistakes. And therefore it is said to err is human, but we should not indifference to the mistakes. We must correct our mistakes. That needs to be understood. And therefore, it was one of the Maurad Chelas, because Fern is the Maurad Chela, DK is the Maurad Chela, that had placed the letter there, and therefore no question of misunderstanding. In the next slide, we will see. I believe that hint was quite broad. A hint was quite broad enough and no deception practiced. The second letter, I think, was thrown on his table directly by Dr. Jalkul. The real spelling of the DK, Jalkul, but not so phonetically. And as it was done by himself, it was a Pakka orthodox phenomenon, and Hume has no need to complain now. So the letter was directly, next letter, second letter was thrown directly on the table. Several were sent to him in various ways, and he may be sure of one thing. However ordinary the means by which the letters reached him, they could not be but phenomenal in reaching India from Tibet. But this does not seem to be taken into any consideration by him. See, this very good phenomenon was happening in those days. Actually, to convince the West, masters brought the London Times newspaper with particular date at Simla on the same day, give a direct evidence. Actually, such phenomenon was a good proof, pakka evidence, because such journey from London to Simla, that time it was taking for 21 days. And they did it phenomenally, so that nobody should doubt the phenomenon. The fact need to be understood here is that actually Jalkul was precipitating KH portrait, and that was to be delivered to Colonel Chesney through decay, deb, and fur. And M was giving training to Fern and testing him for a Pakka phenomenon to be shown to Chesney. So M gave the new picture to Fern, telling him to better send it by post to Colonel Chesney, so that Colonel can come to know that Fern is also connected with masters, as Chesney was disbelieving the Fern. So to make a chela, a co-brother, the master M was trying to dilute the misunderstanding between these. But Fern wanted to carry out his own experiment and study himself. And every day to him, he had choice to practice either stress or to practice peace. So he was undergoing, practicing himself patience in stress and whenever having not more enthusiastic or over enthusiastic. So AP Senate was silent. He knows anger of Hume or anger does not solve anything. On the contrary, you will destroy the co-brother Fern. That is what AP Senate was understanding about the Fern. But Hume was very strict in that sense. So to all those whom this may concern, Master M write in one of the letters to the honorable and doubting company, foolish are the hearts who doubt of our existence or of the powers our community is in possession of for ages and ages. Would that you would open your hearts to the reception of the blessed truth and obtain the fruits of the earthship, if not in this, then in another and better rebirth. Who is for us to answer? This is the call of Master M, unnecessarily doubting and making not fully trusting in us or doubt of our existence, doubt of the power our community is possessing, which they are possessing ages and ages. Why do you doubt? And then who is for us? Answer. This is what they are asking us wholeheartedly. And next slide. And now we come to the really bad part of it, a part for which I blame entirely M for permitting it and exonerate Fern, who would not help it. So here, Hume is a little bit aggressive. Of course, you understand that I write you this in strict confidence, relying upon your honor that whatever happens, you will not betray Fern. Indeed, and I have looked most attentively into the things, the boy was led to become guilty of a deliberate justical deception, rather through Hume's constant insults, suspicious attitude, and deliberate sights at meals and during the hours of work, than from any motive in consequence of his loose notions of morals. This is very clear how relationship was with Fern and Hume, and how Hume was getting disturbed and psychologically depressed also. But Hume was, Fern was under training, and he was doing choice always between stress and peace. In the slide, the M's letters, the production of the amiable Dugpas, in reality, ex Dugpas, whose past sins will never permit him to fully atone for his misdeeds, distinctly say, do either so or and so, or in such a way that tempt him and led him to imagine that in doing no injury to any human being, and when the motive is good, every action becomes legal. So here again, motive is very important, because we see thought, emotions, actions, and the fourth part is motive. So all this is a team. Usually I used to tell TEAM, T for thought, E for emotion, A for action, and M is for the motive. So if you have good motive, then whatever you do, that action becomes a legal action. The same statement I found in Krishnamurti's talk. If you do with wholehearted love, if whatever you do with love, that action is the right action. So the same thing, it is mentioned here. So M's letter, here again they have said, amiable Dugpas. In reality, ex-Dugpas, whose past sins will never permit him to fully atone for his misdeeds. So some of our skandhas, some of our attitudes which we have inherited, they become hindrance as the amiable Dugpas. And they don't allow you to act rightly. Sometimes they make you compulsion to make mistakes also. So I was thus tempted in my youth and had nearly succumbed twice to the temptation, but was saved by my uncle from falling into the monstrous snare. So here, there are many things need to be contemplated. Many times we are tempted. Mara is a king of temptations. So even Buddha also met such temptations. But somebody are there to save us always when you are on the right path. What I want to mention here is KH and AP Senate. Their relationship were very, very close. If you know something from the theosophical literature, that KH has much regard to AP Senate, because in previous life, AP Senate saved the life of KH. This is what it is mentioned in the old diary leaves or in the Light on the Path commentary. You can read it. And therefore, KH also wants, Hume is also necessary for the TS, despite of his faults and weaknesses. Both Hume and APS were selected for the foundation of the Theosophical Society, actually propagation of Theosophical Society. AP Senate did, he was the vice president later on, but Hume left. Hume, but Cage says Hume is necessary for the tears despite his faults and weaknesses. But M is not of that opinion. He was always against Hume because Hume always wants everyone to bow him and do puja to him. This aggressiveness, this assertiveness, M did not like it. He is under the, and therefore, Hume is under the delusion due to his own pride and self-opinion. We'll go to the next. Before that, Master says, if you are under illusion, when shall you trust implicity? When shall you trust implicity in my heart, if not in my wisdom, for which I claim no recognition on your part? It is extremely painful to see you wandering about in a dark labyrinth created by your own doubts, every issue of which, moreover, you close with your own hands. This is what Cage want to console and tell. When shall you trust implicity in my heart, if not in my wisdom? You may be criticizing my wisdom, but at least trust in it. In the beginning, I said, trust is the soul of relationship. You should have such kind of trust. Then only you can establish a right relationship between Chela and Master. In the next slide, we'll go to the next slide. And so was the illustrious, who is a Pakka Orthodox occultist and holds religiously to the old tradition and methods. And so would be any one of you had I consented to accept you for chelas. But as I was aware from the first of what you have confessed to in a letter to H.P. Blavatsky, namely that there was something supremely revolting to the better class of European minds in that idea of being tested, of being under probation, I therefore had always avoided the acceptance of Mr. Hume's often expressed offer to become a chela. So he was not accepted as a chela because Hume doesn't want to undergo any kind of tested or probation. He himself was thinking he is more superior, and these adepts, they don't know what at ground level is. Of course, it was his opinion, and therefore he was not accepted. In the next slide, it says, this may perhaps give you the key to the whole situation. However, this is what happened. Fern had received a letter of mine through a chela with the injunction of causing it to reach its destination immediately. They were going to take the breakfast and there was no time to lose. Therefore, Fern had thrown the letter on a table and ought to have left it there, since there would have been no occasion for him then to lie, but he was vexed with Hume and he devised another dodge. So this is what about that letter it happened. He placed the letter in the folds of Mr. Hume's napkin, who at breakfast took it up and accidentally shook out the letter to the floor, and it appears, to the terrible fright of Moggy and the contented surprise of Hume. But his old suspicion returning to him, a suspicion he had always harbored since I wrote to him that my first letter was brought into the conservatory by one of master's chelas, and that my chela could do little, though he had visited invisibly every part of the house before. Hume looks at Fern full and asks him whether it was he who had placed it there. So this is how their misunderstanding is removed by the young, and they try to console both of them, though it was a training to the Fern. And in the next side, now I have the entire picture before me of Fern's brain at that moment. There is the rapid flash in it. This is what Hume says. There is a rapid flash in it. This saves me, for I can swear I never put it there, meaning the spot on the floor where it had fallen. No, he boldly answers, I have never put it there. He adds mentally, then a vision of yum and a feeling of intense satisfaction and relief for not having been guilty of a direct lie. So, how they were removing the misunderstanding, how they were sending the intense thoughts for the understanding, because whatever misunderstanding is on the lower mental level, and whatever understanding is on the higher mental level. That means they were helping us to raise to the higher mental, and where there is a rapid flash, and that saves from the whatever bad thing was to happen. So this is how they were giving training. So Kate says, not one of those who have only tried to help on the work of the society, however imperfect and faulty their ways and means, will have done so in vain. So whatever you do wholeheartedly, that will help in the progress towards the spiritual path. In the next slide, we'll end with this slide now. It is 45 minutes, then Hindi translation will be there. So in this confused pictures of some Jesuits he had known, of his little child, a disconnected thought of his room, and beams in Mr. Hume's garden, etc. Not a thought of self-deception. Truly then, our friend was taken in, but I would pay any price but I recall the event and replace my letter with somebody else's message. But you see how I am situated. And the last one I will read now. Next one. Yeah. Yam tells me, he gives me carte blanche to tell anything I like to you. He will not have me say a word to him, nor would he ever forgive you. He says, were you to interfere between the punishment of Hume's pride and fate, Fern is not really to be blamed for thinking that so long as the result is accomplished, the details are of no account, since he was brought at such a school, and that he really has the welfare of the cause and heart. Whereas the Hume, it is really bona fide selfishness, egotism, and only motive power, egotistic philanthropist, is a word which paints his portrait at full length. This is what Hume's delusion. So I think let it translate then again, or I will conclude what this letter number 53, strictly speaking, of HPB's Master M, written down by HPB. This is not a strictly speaking a letter, but a letter, certain statements of HPB's Master M, written down by HPB, and these are published in her esoteric instructions number 3. So KH instructs to AP Senate and AO Hume, you ask me to get the old lady to refrain from proposing you for the council. I do not believe there is the slightest danger of her doing it. I know, in fact, that she is the last person in the world to propose you now. Rightly or wrongly, she feels herself injured by you to the very root of her heart. See, there is an inner government, and in inner government, there is also inner council, and one should sponsor or say the name for council, and that is what they were expecting. HPB must say her word, and in that contest, they wrote this letter. That is what HPB says, and I am bound to confess that, no doubt, unwillingly, you have hurt her feelings very deeply upon several occasions. So HPB was very strict, even if he is prepared, but she was not proposing his name. So how the master judge the object is very important. Rather, it is important to contemplate how they judge it, because they fathom deeply into the object. They go profound depth, and then they judge. They never see the surface appearance. On the contrary, they generally leave the appearance to take care of themselves, which indicates we must correct ourselves at personality level so that we can meet each other soul to soul and not through the images that we have each other. They say about HPB, you can never know her correctly or impartially as we see the surface of things. So this is what this letter mentions. So many things we can understand from this letter. Letter is simple, some words are there. Lot of things need to be contemplated and seen in context with what this letter is written. Thank you very much, Vibhaji, for giving me this opportunity, and also to thank you to everyone for listening silently of this long letter.
Thank you, sir, for giving us the interpretation of this letter. I now request Meenakshi ji to give us the translation in Hindi.
नमस्ते, थैंक यू सिस्टर, थैंक यू सर। आज हम लेटर नंबर 75 का अगला पार्ट ले रहे हैं। मास्टर कहते हैं कि सच कहे तो मैंने शिमला में उत्पादित हर फिनोमिना से परिस्थितियों के तहत संदिग्ध हेडक्वार्टर्स को जितना संभव हो उतना दूर रखने की कोशिश की। इसी कारण मिस्टर ह्यूम और मेरे बीच हुए पत्राचार से ही। जब तक HPB, दामोदर और देव पूरी तरह से विलग नहीं हो जाते, तब तक क्या हो सकता है या नहीं हो सकता है, यह कहा नहीं जा सकता था। पहला पत्र जो ह्यूम के कंजर्वेटरी में पाया गया, उसे मैंने M को दिया ताकि उसे 2 नियमित दो नियमित के चेलाओं द्वारा मिस्टर ह्यूम के घर में डाला जा सके। उन्होंने यानी एम ने पत्र को सुब्बाराव को दे दिया क्योंकि उस दिन वे उनसे मिलने वाले थे। सुब्बाराव ने फंड को सामान्य तरीके से पोस्ट किया, इस निर्देश के साथ कि उसे मिस्टर ह्यूम के घर डाल दे या डाक के माध्यम से भेज दे। यदि वह डरता है कि कहीं मिस्टर ह्यूम उससे सवाल करेंगे, चूंकि फंड ऐसा नहीं कर सकता था, उसे जवाब देने का अधिकार नहीं था और इस तरह उसे झूठ बोलना पड़ता था। कई बार ज्वालपुल ने ह्यूम के घर रोथनी कैसल में प्रवेश करने की कोशिश की थी, लेकिन हर बार इतनी तकलीफ हुई कि मैंने उसे छोड़ देने को कहा। वह दीक्षा की तैयारी में है और परिणाम स्वरूप आसानी से असफल हो सकता है। खैर, फर्न ने इसे पोस्ट नहीं किया, बल्कि उसके मित्र एक डुकपा को उस घर में पत्र को डालने के लिए भेजा और उसने पत्र को रात्रि लगभग 2 बजे कंजर्वेटरी में रखा। यह फिनोमिना का आधा भाग था, लेकिन ह्यूम ने इसे पूरी तौर पर लिया और जब उसे नकारा गया तब वह बहुत नाराज हो गया क्योंकि उसे लगा कि उसके जवाब को उसी तरह लेंगे। तब मैंने उसे सांत्वना देने के लिए लिखा और फर्न के प्रति एम के विश्वास को तोड़े बिना जितना मैं कह सकता था उतने स्पष्ट रूप से कह दिया कि वर्तमान समय में ज्वालपुल उसके लिए कुछ कर नहीं सकते और यह कि मौर्य के चेला में से एक ने पत्र को वहां रखा था आदि। मेरा मानना है कि संकेत काफी मात्रा में था और कोई छल नहीं किया गया था। मुझे लगता है कि दूसरा पत्र ज्वालपुल द्वारा उसके टेबल पर यानी ह्यूम के टेबल पर फेंका गया था और यह स्वयं उसके करने के कारण यह एक पक्की सच्ची पारंपरिक घटना थी और ह्यूम को शिकायत करने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है। विभिन्न तरीकों से उसे कई पत्र भेजे गए और उसे एक बात का यकीन होना चाहिए कि पत्र चाहे कितने भी सामान्य रूप से उन तक क्यों न पहुंचते हो, वे तिब्बत से भारत पहुंचने में साधारण नहीं हो सकते। लेकिन ऐसा लगता है कि उसने इस पर गौर नहीं किया। और अब हम इसके सबसे बुरे हिस्से पर आते हैं, वह हिस्सा जिसके लिए मैं पूरी तरह से एम को दोषी ठहराता हूँ, फर्न को अनुमति देने और दोष मुक्त करने के लिए जो उससे कर नहीं सका। बेशक आप यह समझते हैं कि मैं यह पूरे विश्वास के साथ आप पर पूरा भरोसा करते हुए लिख रहा हूँ कि चाहे जो भी हो जाए, आप फर्न के साथ विश्वासघात नहीं करेंगे। वास्तव में, और मैंने इस बात पर बहुत अधिक गौर किया है, उस लड़के को यानी फर्न को उसके दुष्चरित्र के परिणाम स्वरूप किसी भी धारणा के बजाय ह्यूम के लगातार अपमान, संदिग्ध रवैये और भोजन और काम करने के दौरान जानबूझकर उपेक्षा द्वारा जानबूझकर जेसुइटिकल यानी पाखंडी होने का दोषी बनाया गया। फिर एम का पत्र जो एक मिलनसार डुप्पा के द्वारा रचित था, जो वास्तव में भूतपूर्व डुप्पा था, जिसके पिछले पाप उसे अपने कुकर्मों के लिए पूरी तरह से प्रायश्चित करने नहीं देंगे। वह पत्र स्पष्ट रूप से कहता है, या तो ये करे, या तो ये करो और वो करो, या इस तरह से करो। वे उसे लुभाते हैं और उसे यह कल्पना करने के लिए प्रेरित करते हैं कि किसी मनुष्य को चोट न पहुंचाने में, और जब मकसद अच्छा हो तो हर कार्य वैध हो जाता है। इस प्रकार मैं अपनी युवावस्था में ललचाया गया था और 2 बार लगभग प्रलोभित हुआ था, लेकिन मेरे चाचा ने इस विकट जाल में गिरने से बचा लिया था। और ऐसे ही इलस्ट्रियस यानी मास्टर एम भी थे, जो एक पक्के रूढ़िवादी ऑकल्टिस्ट है और पुरानी परंपराओं को और विधियों को निष्ठापूर्वक मानते हैं, और यदि मैं आपको चेला के रूप में स्वीकार करने के लिए सहमत होता तो आप में से ऐसा कोई भी होता। लेकिन जैसा कि मैं पहले से ही जानता था, जिसे आपने एचपीबी को लिखे एक पत्र में कबूल किया, अर्थात यूरोपीय बुद्धिवादियों का प्रोबेशन के तहत परीक्षण किए जाने के विचार से उनमें बहुत ही विरोध था। इसलिए मिस्टर ह्यूम के अक्सर चेला बनने के लिए व्यक्त प्रस्ताव को स्वीकार करने से हमेशा टाला है। शायद यह आपको पूरी परिस्थिति का समाधान दे सकती है। हालांकि जो हुआ वह इस तरह से है। फर्न को मेरा एक पत्र एक चेला के माध्यम से प्राप्त हुआ था, जिसमें उसे तुरंत अपने गंतव्य स्थान तक पहुंचाने का आदेश था। वे यानी ह्यूम और फर्न नाश्ता करने जा रहे थे और समय बहुत ही कम था। फर्न ने टेबल पर पत्र को फेंक दिया था और उसे वही छोड़ देना चाहिए था, क्योंकि तब उसके पास झूठ बोलने का कोई अवसर नहीं होता। लेकिन वह ह्यूम से चिढ़ा हुआ था, नाराज था, और उसने चकमा देने की अन्य योजना बनाई। उसने पत्र को ह्यूम के रुमाल की तह में रख दिया, जिन्होंने नाश्ते के समय उसे उठाया और गलती से पत्र को फर्श पर गिरा दिया, जिससे ह्यूम की पत्नी मौगी बहुत ही डर गई और ह्यूम को संतुष्टि भरा आश्चर्य हुआ। लेकिन उसका पूर्वतन संदेह फिर वापस आया, वह संदेह जो उसने हमेशा तब से पाल रखा था जब से मैंने उसे यह लिखा था कि मेरा पहला पत्र कंजर्वेटरी में एम के एक चेला द्वारा लाया गया था, और यह कि मेरा चेला, हालांकि वह पहले भी अदृश्य रूप में घर के हर हिस्से में जा चुका है, वह कुछ नहीं कर सकता था। ह्यूम फर्न पर पूरी तरह नजर फेरते हुए कहते हैं कि कहीं पत्र को उस जगह रखने वाला वह तो नहीं। अब मेरे सामने फर्न के दिमाग की उस क्षण की पूरी छवि है। उसमें तेजी से यह विचार चमकता है कि इससे मैं बच गया, क्योंकि मैं कसम खा कर कह सकता हूँ कि मैंने उस पत्र को वहां कभी नहीं रखा था, यानी फर्श पर जहां वह पत्र गिरा था वह जगह। वह निर्भीकता से कहता है, नहीं। वह मन में कहता है, मैंने उसे वहां पर कभी नहीं रखा। फिर उसके सामने एम की नजर एम का चित्र आता है, और सीधे सीधे झूठ का दोषी नहीं होने के लिए उत्कट संतुष्टि और राहत की भावना, जिन्हें वह जानता था, ऐसे जेसुइट्स की धुंधली सी छवियां, उसके छोटे बच्चे का विचार, मिस्टर ह्यूम के बगीचे में उसके कमरे और बीम्स का विचार, लेकिन धोखा देने का एक भी विचार नहीं था। सच में हमारे मित्र को एक बार ही धोखे में आने दिया गया था, लेकिन यदि मैं उस घटना को याद कर सकता और मेरे उस पत्र को किसी और के संदेश से बदल सकता तो मैं कोई भी कीमत चुकाऊंगा। लेकिन आप देख सकते हैं मैं किस स्थिति में हूँ। एम मुझे कहते हैं कि वे मुझे आपको कुछ भी बताने का अधिकार देते हैं। वे मुझे ह्यूम से कुछ भी कहने नहीं देंगे, न ही वे आपको कभी माफ करेंगे यदि आप ह्यूम के अभिमान की सजा और उसके नसीब के बीच हस्तक्षेप करेंगे तो। यदि नतीजा प्राप्त होता है तब ब्यौरे की जरूरत नहीं। ऐसी फर्न की धारणा को वास्तव में दोष नहीं देना चाहिए, क्योंकि वह ऐसे ही विचारधारा में पला बढ़ा है और उसके हृदय में सच में सोसाइटी के उद्देश्य के प्रति कल्याणकारी भावना है। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Meenakshi ji, thank you very much for that translation. I now request anybody, if you have a question or any discussion on this letter, you may please unmute and ask. Any questions? I would like to add some clarity on the context of this letter. Sir, Shinde sir, if I may, with your permission.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So in this letter, actually, we can see two things are happening. One thing is that Mahatma KH is communicating with AO Hume and AP Sinet, giving them instructions by sending letters. And the other process is that Mahatma M, he is testing Fern for who is on probation. So these are the two things. Now, in the communication between KH and Hume, letters were being precipitated. In the beginning of the letter, Mahatma KH mentions that the Chauhan stopped the precipitation process. He said that letters communication was not to be done by precipitation. So Mahatma KH had to find other means how to communicate with Hume. And therefore, he would send it either through his some chela or by post, but they could not precipitate. That was the order from the Chauhan. So he would try every means to send his letter to Hume, but on this one occasion, he gave his letter to Mahatma M to send it to Hume. And what Mahatma M did, he was testing Fern and he gave it to Fern so that Fern may send it wherever it is required to be sent. Now, Fern was not fully prepared. He could not do those occult process of sending the letters. And this was the whole confusion that Hume mistakes that Mahatma KH is testing Fern or allowing him to become the chela by producing these phenomena. And he is not taking Hume as the chela. So this was Hume's delusion, whereas it was actual testing between Mahatma M and Fern. Nothing to do with Mahatma KH. So this whole confusion added to what was happening. But Mahatma KH did not have the liberty to tell Hume that Fern is being tested. That is against the rules. And therefore, they have mentioned that he should not speak a lie also. He should not say that, yes, I have put the letter or I have not put the letter in the napkin. So Mahatma M tells that neither AP Sinet nor Mahatma KH should tell anything to Hume nor to Fern. Now that slide which mentioned about the Dugpa, in the Mahatma letters, previously also this word has come, the Dugpas. One thing is correct, as Professor Shinde ji has mentioned, that they are the vices in us also, our lower, baser feelings. Now, the other part, which what the Mahatma says, that these Dugpas, they are the black magicians or the sorcerers. And some of them, they leave their old ways, the way that selfishness or the black magic, what they would do, and they are used by the Mahatmas to do their scavengers' work. This statement is mentioned in one of the letters. Scavengers' work meaning the Mahatmas employ these Dugpas to test their aspirants or the would-be chelas to remove the whatever residual vices are there in the chelas. Now, so in the letter, I would like to share here that slide which says, because that is a very important slide which talks about how the testing is done. This is the slide number 20. So it says that then M's letters, they distinctly say, so the letters which he would write to Fern, that do either so and so or in such and such way. So these letters which M would write to Fern, they would tempt Fern and they would lead him to imagine that in doing no injury to human beings, and when the motive is good, then every action becomes legal. So this was a temptation. This is how he was being tested. And Mahatma KH says that even he was tempted when he was young, but his uncle saved him. And also Mahatma M, that is the illustrious, he was also tempted in the same way. So this is the kind of probation or the testing which is done on Fern. So this was all I wanted to add. Thank you very much. If you have any questions on this, you may please ask.
No, I may say,
Yes,
in a way, we don't know what was in the minds of masters or divine plan. But one thing we can conclude, it is a way Hume was being punished. Punished by whom? Punished by masters, but through Fern. They made Fern to make wrong things so that Hume will be punished. And this was the plan of M. And he prohibited KH and also Senate not to interfere.
Yes.
So these are the very deep plannings, how they give training and how they make everything smooth is really something to contemplate. Thank you, Vivaji, adding very nicely. And even Meenakshi also, what she read, it was more, we could understand more easily in Hindi
Yes.
also. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
So with this, I think, sir, in the next session, you will complete the letter.
Hello, madam. Namaskar.
Namaste, sir.
Vivaji, third
Sir,
part will be the ending one.
Okay. Okay. Yes, yes, brother, please go ahead. You have a question?
I am talking about Mr. Hume.
Yes.
Hume, notwithstanding his faults, Hume, notwithstanding his faults, he was absolutely necessary to the TS. How he was absolutely necessary to the TS?
Oh, because he was directly connected to the British government and he was having a editor of the pioneering these things. And he was a very intelligent man. And therefore, he was required for the TS. And you know, he became the Indian National Congress started after the convention of the Theosophical Society at Adyar. And A.O. Hume was the first president of that. He is the father of Indian National Congress to bring freedom to the India. That was also the aim of the masters to get it. That is the what masters were thinking. There has to be freedom for the Indian people first. Then this theosophy will propagate in India. Otherwise, without freedom, how can they think deeply on such spiritual teachings? So Hume was very great in that sense and very useful for because he is the connection between British government and the masters on the other hand. This is how they were doing through Hume all that what they want to do. That's what I think, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you. One more question, sir.
The
Mahatma KH and M both have very good relationship between them, but difference in their method of working with chelas.
Because
both have
they are belonging to the different rays. Mahatma M belongs to ray, first ray, and KH belongs to second ray. So that temperament is there, no doubt.
But the way of teaching will be same, no? Rules will be the same for both. About taking this chelaship, accepting chelaship, rules must be the same.
Rules must be the same, but it depends, when we have a guide for the PhD. So everything depends upon the temperament of the guide. In the same way, KH has different temperament to train his chela. M has different temperament to train his chela. And therefore, they are having their understanding, but the misunderstanding is only on our world, in our world, not misunderstanding in their world. That needs to be understood.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Welcome, welcome.
Any other question?
कुछ तो मतलब लगे कि पूछते हैं एक बार टिपिकल दोस्तों, सही बात नहीं थी, दीदी उनको इतना इम्पोर्टेंस क्यों दे रहे थे? बंद करो.
I think we can conclude the session for today, and in the next session we will be completing this letter. Thank you, sir, so much for explaining this letter. It is quite interesting to see how the masters are testing their different chelas. Okay.
Even they are testing to us also.
Yes, yes. Many times we also are deluded by what we see on the surface. We need to go deep below the surface to understand the reality. Okay, so with this, we come to the conclusion. We'll end the session with the closing prayer. Om Asito Ma Sadgamaya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Sarvesham Swastirabhavatu Sarvesham Shantirabhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste to everyone and thank you for joining.